thank you, Dr. Bennett. I appreciate it. It's an honor.
We have had a lot of people say, well, wait a minute, I'm a Second Amendment guy, I'm all for it, but what's wrong with the background checks of, people with criminal records and people who are mentally unstable?
Absolutely nothing.
All right. Okay, let's hear the president. Go ahead, cut one, Claude.
Instead of supporting this compromise, the gun lobby and its allies willfully lied about the bill. They claimed that it would create some sort of big brother gun registry, even though the bill did the opposite. This legislation, in fact, outlawed any registry. Plain and simple, right there in the text. But that didn't matter.
I played the wrong one. Let me play this one, too, and then we won't play any more, and then it's all yours. Play number 3. Go ahead.
Some say that blocking this step would be a victory. And my question is, a victory for who? A victory for what? All that happened today was the preservation of the loophole that lets dangerous criminals buy guns without a background check. That didn't make our kids safer. Victory for not doing something that 90% of Americans, 80% of Republicans, the vast majority of your constituents wanted to get done? It begs the question, who are we here to represent?
So all he wants to do is do background checks on people with criminal records and people who are mentally unstable. What's wrong with that?
Nothing. We have a background check system that already provides for convicted felons and so forth. What needs to happen, Dr. Bennett, is we need to break down exactly what it is he's talking about and what it is he's so angry about. And one word that comes to mind, description for his behavior yesterday, was petulant. Very, very childish, very sulky, very divisive. I don't think I've ever seen a president act this way when he hasn't gotten his way. But background checks need to be fixed. The current system needs to be fixed to include the mentally ill. And I don't believe it needs to be expanded. It needs to be fixed to include those particular records. And I think good like minds can come together and see that happens without expanding, troublingly so, the burden and the continued burden on law-abiding citizens who everybody, including the Newtown father yesterday, admitted wouldn't have saved his own son.
Yeah, I heard that. What is the expansion here that you are worried about and that others are worried about? If someone says, to me on the street or anybody listening to the show, hey, what's with you guys? I mean, here they just wanted to expand background checks. Why are you opposed to that?
Well, I'll read the bill.
All right.
A portion of the bill which states the transfer is made between spouses, between parents or spouses of parents and their children, or spouses of their children, between siblings or spouses of siblings, or between grandparents or spouses of grandparents and their children, or spouses of their grandchildren, or between aunts. You're getting into the federal government in your house.
Yeah.
And now you're talking about criminalizing, and the NRA didn't lie about it. It does criminalize certain activity between private individuals today that weren't criminalized yesterday. And I think the fear is that as we get the federal government closer and closer and farther and deeper into our own homes, that this is a very slippery slope because we're criminalizing the private transfer of private property, and that's very scary to a lot of people.
It's not just private to private, it's family member to family member. It's father passing down the Vietnam rifle to his son, isn't that right?
Not necessarily the way that you read this. It was, it seemed to exempt, but that's the problem.
Exempted family members?
It exempted family members that I just described between children and their spouses, but the description was very confusing. And here we have the federal government describing what we can do in our homes with our own private property and putting it in a bill. Is frightening to a lot of people.
I see. Lobo is in Houston and called earlier, and I promised we'd put him back on. Go ahead, Lobo.
I heard him. How you doing?
Good.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, I am on.
Yeah, you're on. Okay. You're on.
Dr. Bennett, it's good to talk to you again. The point I was wanting to make was that, my skepticism. In the late 50s, I remember hearing my dad and my uncles debate the government's claim that the Social Security number would not be used as a national ID, and it is. And then in the 60s, I remember hearing the abortion legalization debates where they said that it would never be used as a contraceptive, but it is. And then in the 70s, I remember hearing when the gays were saying they just wanted to go to work without being harassed. And now we're changing the definition of marriage. So when they say that this gun bill will not be a national registry, and they're not going to pick up our weapons, I tend to be a little skeptical.
All right. Go ahead, Mark.
That's a great point. What the caller is saying is exactly what's happened. We all know we give our Social Security number out for any number of reasons that we're not supposed to. The fact here regarding this bill, although it had wording in it that said the government shall not do this, can anybody give me any more examples, as the caller just did, of what the government does that they shouldn't do? Two issues where this becomes very concerning is health care. Our gun health, we have Obamacare. Now, what's going to happen here? We're seeing this monstrosity begin to erupt now. Where are guns going to come in? One of the president's 23 executive orders commissioned the Centers for Disease Control to begin studying guns. Diseases, guns, health care, government health care. You're a gun owner, your costs go up or you're denied health care. This is a big, giant concern. And the next one, of course, is federal dealers are already required to keep a record of that transaction. Now they're expanding who is going to have to be put on that list, or not necessarily a list, but whose records are going to be kept, giving the government now, if they want it, access to those private transactions in the home. Again, this is very troubling to a lot of people, and this is why the grassroots erupted against this bill.
Tell me about Senator Toomey. We know Pat Toomey. We like him. He's a very conservative senator. What gave here in the case of Pat Toomey? Have you spoken to him about it?
I have not. I would like to, and I don't know.
Okay.
An interesting dynamic occurred here. Alan Gottlieb, the head of the Second Amendment Foundation and the Citizens for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms, came out publicly in support of this bill.
Right.
Much to the astonishment of the pro-gun community, myself included. Alan is going to be a guest on Armed American Radio this weekend to explain this, and I was shocked at what I saw. Now, he withdrew in the name of his group his support for the bill in a press release yesterday.
Oh, he did.
Because it didn't go far enough.
Glad to know, because we reported that. Okay, good. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see his position and where he stands versus the firm stance that the National Rifle Association and the Gun Owners of America took here. Interesting conversation for sure.
Yeah. Let's go to Ron in Mayfield, Ohio. Go ahead, Ron.
Hey, how are you doing today, sir?
Good.
All right. A couple things. Yesterday he talked about he didn't like the fact that everybody was lying against these bills. Well, we already know that he's a liar because he's admitted to some of the things that he wrote in his book was a lie. So how can we trust him? The second thing is, for a fact that Chicago has the biggest laws on the books, and they still kill people. Criminals do not care about how they get the gun. They're just going to use it when they get it.
Ron, if I may comment, you're absolutely correct about that. The fact is, the underlying fact is, as Chris Cox from the National Rifle Association, and I'm not a spokesperson for them, I'm a member and I read the reports that you do as well as members, but Chris Cox made it very clear. We stand behind legislation that will stop criminals. Criminals don't get background checks. And Obama has, in fact, lied. I don't really take much stock in that. He's a politician. I just kind of assume, unfortunately, in today's day and age, that comes with the territory. What concerned me more about yesterday was the divisiveness, was the utter disdain shown for approximately half of his fellow Americans as their president and commander-in-chief. It is astonishing to me, and I don't think, Dr. Bennett, in my 51-year existence, that I've ever seen politics played quite this way as this group and gang does.
Yeah, it was quite interesting. It was very strong, and there he was with the Newtown parents. Pointed out, some other people have pointed out that, you had a pretty big body count after Aurora, but you didn't have so much from the president, the difference being presidential campaign election was going on. That would be a bad reason to trim your sails on a point of fundamental principle, I would argue.
I would argue that with you as well.
Yeah. Let's go to Robert in Louisville. Go ahead, Robert.
Hello.
Hi.
Bill, and pleasure to be with you this morning.
Thank you, Robert.
I listen to you every morning after dropping the kids off at school, but one of the irony of ironies, I try to bite my lip and keep it from bleeding, is to hear the most pro-abortion president in the history of the United States talk about concern for children's lives, and under the mask of basically wanting to bring his socialist programs via some disaster.
Right. Did you have a question for Mark, or?
Well, I just really wanted to vent my spleen a little bit.
That's all right. You can vent. That's fine.
I hear it day in and day out. And
well, what about this, Robert? Not just the Gosnell thing in Philadelphia with the children, but what about Fast and Furious? I mean, what about that, Mark? I mean, Fast and Furious. Why not have those family members of those folks in the room?
Well, it certainly doesn't fit the political agenda, and part of the problem here that this group is going to have moving forward, and Fast and Furious is an example of this. If you recall, within hours of the Newtown shooting, the children's bodies were still on the floor of that school.
Yeah.
The President of the United States was holding a press conference discussing how Congress needed to confirm an acting head of the ATF, something that they hadn't done for 6 years. And I quote him, he said, the very organization, referring to the ATF, whose job it is to keep illegal guns out of the hands of criminals. I was flabbergasted. Where was the media that didn't come up and say, you mean the same ATF that allowed 30-some hundred guns, 3,000-some guns, to walk across the border?
Yeah.
And it put in the hands of some of the most vicious criminals. See, the president knew he could get away with that statement, Bill, and wouldn't be questioned. And the problem that he's going to face moving forward, because the next big push for gun control will occur as we approach the 2014 elections. And as you know, that date is rapidly approaching. These people are believing their own spin, I think, and I think that was evident in the president's response yesterday in his anger, that his petulance that he didn't get his way, because I think they're believing their own spin from their friends in the media, and that's going to be very dangerous for them as they head into the 2014 elections.
Curious what you think, Mark, for the future, and then I'll let you go, and we thank you, which is, people said, well, this doesn't end and it'll be back. I don't know. I think if they couldn't do it with this kind of orchestration and choreography, I'm not sure they can do it at all.
I agree with you. I think that they've reached the peak. They have their man in office. They have a Democrat majority in the Senate, let's face it, folks. And it was Harry Reid that set the Senate rules and procedure yesterday.
Media cheering squad.
Media cheering squad. They've got the wind. The wind was clearly at their back, so what remains to be seen. Let's see if they run on it in 14.
Mark, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Bennett.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.